This is our theme or our outline that Paul says, when I was with you, I performed these functions. I encouraged, I comforted, and I urged you. And so we started basically with the idea that what our job is as parents is, number one, that we encourage. And when we encourage our students to learn to do things, we get them outside their comfort zones, we expose them to intentional adversity, we make them face some of their fears, make them do hard things. What we basically fulfill is two of these perceptions. Number one, I'm capable. Number two, I'm significant. Well, you also fulfill the idea of I'm significant when you help respond to crisis. And basically, this Greek word comfort is paramithomai, which basically means to literally give counsel or advice. Some people have defined it as to stimulate to the discharge of the ordinary duties of life. In other words, hey, this is going on. Well, I understand that's going on, but you still have to do what you have to do. And so we basically talk about crisis or understanding or crisis intervention. The difficulty in understanding our young people is one thing is implicit beliefs. Implicit beliefs are the ideas that I make decisions about how the world works. And nobody else walks around in my head, and I don't walk around in your head. So we never really get to test those with reality. We never get to hey, is my view of the world right? Young people, and it's no offense to the young people in the room, are egocentric. They are living in a way where most of what's happening is about survival. And so they only think about themselves. And so they can't walk by one of these windows without looking at their reflection. They can't pick up one of these things without doing one of these. Well, if everything is about you, then everything is also your fault. That guy picked on me because there's something wrong with me. Mom and Dad's divorce, it caused that to happen. This guy molested me, I must have asked for it. And all of a sudden they end up with this idea that these things in life are true. And if you end up with beliefs or implicit ideas about why things happen, and those things are not accurate or they're not healthy, you end up with a long history of dysfunction. And so part of the job for parents is to help us acclimate. First of all, I got to figure out what's going on in my kid's head. And then when I figure out what's going on in their head, I challenge that against reality. I'm not a long-distance shooter, okay? I'm an intermediate distance shooter. The guys who shoot long distance have taught me some things. So if I've got my rifle and it's set here on a brace, and I aim at a target 100 yards away, and I dial my scope. A scope has these little marks on it. They're called minute of angle. If I turn that thing one full click, it will move the bullet one direction or the other, up, down, left, or right. We'll do left or right. It'll move my bullet to the right 1 inch at 100 yards. That's a vector. Everybody get that? So if I draw a line to the back of the room and I make another straight line, the longer that line gets, the further apart those lines get. That's called a vector. So at 100 yards, I'm an inch. At 200 yards, I'm 2 inches. At 300 yards, I'm 3 inches. At 1,800 yards, I'm shooting people in the next county that don't even know I'm shooting at them. So I'm a kid. Mom and Dad divorced. This guy molested me. Somebody picked on me. Somebody made fun of my race, my disability, my height, whatever. And I believe this is true about me. And I believe it for 5 years. For 10 years, for 25 years. That's how people get enmeshed into dysfunctional behavior, because we have these implicit beliefs. Not only do we form those beliefs from growing up in our homes of origin, we also form those beliefs because of trauma. When something bad happens to you, it says something to you or about you. I'm weak, I'm worthless, I deserved it. It says something about the person who did it. They're strong, they're powerful, adults can't be trusted. It says something about my past. I've always been this way. It says something about my future. I'll always be this way. And a lot of times in churches, we let it say something about God. And so when somebody comes to you, your child, your spouse, a congregant, a member, your adult sibling, and they say, this is what happened to me, what do we typically do when we enter into those conversations? We try to solve problems, right? You got a child in a highly emotional state, and I'm going to use adult language and I'm going to use intellect with him. How do you think that works? Give directions to a colorblind dude using the color of buildings. Turn left at the blue building, right at the green building. Oh, he's lost. So what we have to do when we start talking about crisis intervention and understanding is basically this idea of active listening or emotion coaching. So much of our discussions with our spouses, with our kids, and with other people look like this. Understand me. No, 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 understand me. No, 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 understand me. And when we change the dynamic of our interactions with people to this, let me make sure that I understand you. Now, I'm not saying that what you believe is reasonable. I'm not saying it's rational. I'm just letting you know that I see the world from your standpoint. And if I saw the world the way you see the world, I might feel the way you feel, and it's okay to feel the way you feel. When your children or your spouse communicates to you about emotional issues, they say 70% of attempts to communicate about emotions are unheard, misunderstood, and rejected. So when somebody comes to us and they're in a highly charged emotional state, our job is to make them feel heard, understood, and accepted. But what we tend to do is we are emotion dismissing. You don't really feel that way. You're emotion denying. You don't feel that way. Or we're emotion disapproving. You can't feel that way. You ever have trouble dealing with somebody in grief? Well, that's because we're emotion dismissing, emotion denying, emotion disapproving. You know, your son comes home, he's in the 7th grade. I hate my soccer coach, I want to kill him. Well, in today's world, if you posted that on Facebook, you'd be in federal prison. So what do we tell our children? Now, you don't hate your coach, and you don't want to kill him. You ever been a kid with highly charged, unregulated emotions and been really, 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 really angry at somebody? When I was in the 4th grade, I saw a dude murder a puppy. I got off the school bus. I was walking up my driveway, guy 3 houses down named Jimmy Horton. I heard this horrible, horrible sound. I looked up. He's standing on his porch. He's beating a puppy, picks it up, throws it down. And the puppy didn't move again. I had a pretend M1 carbine rifle I got from Santa Claus. I'd get off the school bus every day, go get my M1, crawl under my dad's car, and lay there. And when Mr. Horton came out, I'd take a shot at him and I'd go play. I hated that dude. My dad said, not our dog. That's not the way we treat dogs. There's nothing you can do about that. It dawned on me as I got older that what I was pretending to do was worse than what he'd actually done. But as a kid in the 4th grade, I hated the dude. I hate my soccer coach. I don't want to kill him. No, you don't. Yeah, you do. Why do you hate your soccer coach? That's the question to ask. Well, this new kid moved in and he gave him my spot. Oh, so how does that feel to you? Well, it feels unfair. He's never been to practice. He doesn't do anything. He didn't do the work. And this was my spot. I played it for 2 years, and this new kid comes in and he just gives it to him. So you're really, really angry with your coach. Notice I'm not dismissing, I'm not denying, I'm not disapproving. I'm making him feel heard, understood. Well, if I felt that way, if I interpret it this way, I'd probably feel that way. It's okay to feel that way. I'm not emotion dismissing, I'm not emotion disapproving, and I'm not emotion denying. By the way, where'd the new kid move in from? Brazil? Okay. So if you were a coach and you could let the Brazilian kid play soccer on your team, would you give him your spot? Yeah. Okay, just asking. And a lot of times you don't have to fix anything as much as you just set up what we call metaphorical healing. Because if I can set up in your brain this, your brain naturally wants to go toward health. It wants to fix that message and do that. I have people all the time, come in with phobias. I'm afraid of dogs. Why are you afraid of dogs? I was 8 years old and a Doberman bit me. Okay, you do realize now at 28 that Doberman's dead. He's been to see Jesus a long time ago. They don't live that long, all right? Yeah, I understand that intellectually, but I'm still scared of dogs. Well, you understand that a Yorkie and a Doberman are different. Yeah, but my brain understands this is similar, and that which is similar gets treated as the same. If you get stung by a hornet, you'll dodge a housefly. If you're scared of a snake, you'll chop a water hose. So when something traumatic happens to you, your implicit beliefs say, hey, this is similar, I'll treat it as the same. That's how trauma works. And sometimes your brain records things that you're not even aware of. The angle of the sun, the music in the background, the color shirt you were wearing, the flavor Slurpee you were drinking. And anytime your brain says, hey, that's similar, it's the same, and we react to that. And we do it all the time. My mom ate 5 Captain D's shrimp, got food poisoning. And now guess what? She never eats shrimp again. Now, of the number of shrimp she sent to the other place, she's going to let 5 determine her entire history with shrimp and her entire future with shrimp. She's going to let that be determined by 5 shrimp. How often do we do that? Well, instead of me trying to intellectualize that with you, we do what's known as metaphorical learning. By the way, intellectually, okay, right up here, this part of your brain. What did David know about Bathsheba? I'm on my roof, you're on your roof. That means we don't live in the same house. Hey, who is this girl? Isn't she the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Dude probably wrote it on the wall. Wife. Okay. David has her over for dinner. And they're involved in things they shouldn't be involved in. Intellectually, David knows what's going on because when she says, hey, I'm going to have a baby, he says, we need to bring your husband home from the army. That way he'll come home on furlough, and Uriah says, I'm not going to sleep with my wife while my friends are sleeping in tents. Well, come back to the palace, I'll get you drunk and then send you home. He sleeps on the steps. God told Moses, when you get a king, you will make him write his own copy of this law. Assuming that was obeyed, David had his own handwritten copy of the law. He knows thou shalt not commit adultery. Intellectually, David knows all these things, but how's David behaving? And then this old prophet says, hey, let me tell you a sheep story. Hey, this guy's really rich, got a bunch of sheep. This guy down the road has a baby sheep. He treats it like a pet. This guy has guests, and instead of killing one of the 1,000 sheep he has, he takes this guy's sheep and cooks it for dinner. David said, that man's going to die. Nathan says, you're that man. Instant heartbreak. Instant epiphany. Instant recognition. Write Psalm 51. God wants a broken and contrite heart. When you end up with people in crisis and trauma and you try to intellectualize with them, you're miscommunicating. They want to be heard, understood, and accepted, and then the metaphorical healing can take place. So you're scared of dogs, yeah. You have any friends who have dogs? Yeah. They live inside or outside? They live inside. Your friends have kids? Yeah. So you have friends with dogs who live inside with their children. Okay. How about those Braves? And we don't talk about the dog anymore. Now, he leaves my office going, I got a problem. All dogs are dangerous. My friends have dogs. They live inside with their kids. I got to call Child Protection Services, or I got to ninja up and go take care of that dog. And all of a sudden that night, his subconscious mind says, there's something you believe about dogs, and it doesn't work. I get a call the next day, almost every, what'd you do to me? I didn't do anything to you. I let your brain solve a problem you were unwilling to confront. So when our children go into crisis, they don't need solutions. They need understanding. They need those conversations to go from here to here. We can't be emotion dismissing, we can't be emotion denying, and we can't be emotion disapproving. Now, this PowerPoint was set up to build in sequence. And when they converted my 1972 software to theirs, it won't do the animation. So you're going to get a lot of information at one time. Try not to panic, okay? So for every event that takes place, you have a byproduct that is emotions. And all the emotions you have are balance. All the emotions you have are valid. They lead to balance and harmony. Godly sorrow works repentance that leads to salvation, not to be regretted. When I feel guilty about something, I change my behavior. I'm a happy dude. I feel guilty about something in an attempt to hide that. I insulate. Insulation becomes isolation. Then I'm self-destructive. The difference in Judas and Peter is 3 days. Have the conversation between Peter and Judas. I can't believe you told those guys you knew where Jesus was. I can't believe you told those guys you didn't know him. They both were guilty. One repents, preaches the first gospel sermon. One self-destructs. So for every event that you have, you're going to have a byproduct that's emotions. When your emotions are used properly, they lead to balance and harmony. When your emotions are not used properly, they lead to distress, destruction, or dysfunction. So why do some emotions lead to healthy things and some emotions lead to unhealthy things? Well, that's because our emotions create in us not good or bad things. This thing is frozen. It hates me. There you go. So what happens is that every time we have an event, we run that event through a perception filter. That perception is the rules I have about life. These people are safe. These people are dangerous. These people are good. These people are bad. I'm worthless. You're powerful. I'm worthless and unimportant. All those perceptions. Nobody who doesn't believe in Bigfoot has ever seen him. That's interesting. I spend a lot of time in the woods, climb trees there before sun up, there after sundown. I see something move across a ridge. I go, hey, that's a guy in a gorilla suit. Hey, that's a guy in a ghillie suit. Hey, that's a bear. Hey, that's my wife's mother. I got all kinds of things I can come up with, and it's never a giant arthropod that lives on our continent. They don't exist. I don't believe in them. I never see them. Guess what the people who believe in Bigfoot see every single time they're in the woods? I saw a Bigfoot. It's a heffalump or a woozle. And it doesn't matter what we saw. My perceptions affect what I see stronger than what I see affect my perceptions. So when something happens in my life, my perceptions give it meaning. You said this, you didn't say this, you did this, you didn't do that. That means something to me, and it means something about me. And to the degree that that meaning is valid, I end up with healthy emotions. To the degree that meaning is invalid, I end up with my emotions creating distress, dysfunction, or destruction. You got 12 kids. It's supper time. Only 11 show up. Is that a problem for anybody? So your brothers sold you into slavery. Your name is Joseph. What do they tell their dad? They don't tell him anything. The plan is, this is the story we're going to give Dad. But what they do, they take a coat, they dip it in goat's blood, and they hand it to Dad. Dad said, this means my son is dead. This means he was torn by a wild animal. This means I'll go to my grave mourning. I'll never be happy again. Is that what the bloody coat really means? Joseph not dead, hadn't been eaten by a lion, and he's living better than they are. They're starving to death. He's running Egypt. Oh, wow. And go ahead and take Joseph's perspective. Today, I had the special coat. Now I don't, and I'm a slave in Egypt. And nobody came to look for me. He doesn't know his brother said I was dead. All he knows is I was the special kid with the special coat today, and tomorrow, nobody's looking for me. Notice what he names his children. I have forgotten the sorrows of my father's house is what one of their names mean. He thinks those guys abandoned him. He thinks his dad abandoned him too. That explains his behavior when his brothers come to Egypt. You ever notice that the great patriarch Joseph kind of acts like a squirrel when his brothers come to Egypt? I'm going to manipulate you guys. I'm going to con you guys. I think the original plan, he asked them. They come in. They don't recognize him. He's dressed like an Egyptian. Got the cool haircut, snake hat, you know. His brothers come in. They don't know who he is. He knows who they are. And he says, do you have another brother? Dude, that's a trap question. Yeah. Where is he? A lion ate him? Will they be man enough to go, we dropped him in a pit and sold him? So they're sitting in front of his, they're bowing down just like his dream said they would. And he says, you got another brother? Yeah. Oh, this will be interesting. His name's Benjamin. What? Benjamin? I've got a blood brother, not a half brother. You bring him here. We can't do that, sir. No. You bring him here. No, you don't understand. Our dad lost another brother. Oh, so there's another one. See, our dad lost another brother, and if anything happens to this kid, this guy's going to lose it. The wheels will come off. He'll have a meltdown. Well, until I see him, you won't see my face again. Have a nice famine. Well, they go home and they tell Dad, look, we got to take Benjamin. Dad said, no. He said, I've already lost one son. I can't lose another son. I'll go to my grave mourning. And they go, look, you don't understand. The man strictly asked us, do we have another brother? We said, yeah, we have Benjamin. He said, until I see him, you won't see my face. So they bring Benjamin back. What's the plan with Benjamin? Hey, take my cup, my diviner's cup, you hide it in his kid's sack. Give them grain, let them have all they want. On the way home, you pull them over. Whoop, whoop, they pull them over. Hey, somebody stole something from the palace. No, sir, we didn't steal anything from the palace. No, you don't understand. Somebody stole something from the palace. Hey, look, we're men of integrity. We don't steal things. You search us, and tell you what, the guy you find it with will be your slave forever. Joseph's slave says, no, my master said, no, they said you can kill us. He says, my master said, whoever I find this cup with becomes my slave forever. Deal, because we ain't got it. They start searching it. Guess what happens? Benjamin's got it. Come with me, son. And then the plan is, Benjamin comes back to Egypt, because what they do to Benjamin, they hung him out to dry, just like they did me. Benjamin comes back to Egypt, and Joseph says, look, you're actually my brother. Those guys are our half-brothers. They sold you out. They sold me out. Let them die. But instead of Benjamin coming back by himself, they come back with him. And Judah says, look, you don't understand our dad. You don't understand the trauma. Let him go. I'll stay here. I'll be your slave forever. Joseph's idea about how these guys would behave, his anticipated understanding, crushes. And he has such an emotional meltdown, he runs everybody out of the room, because you're not supposed to be emotional in front of a bunch of Egyptians. And he cries so loud, they hear it at Pharaoh's house. Something's going on with Joseph. What he thought these events meant to him or about him, about their dad, not what hey, I've been here 17 years. You guys run back and forth to buy grain like you run to Walmart. Nobody came looking for me. And yet when his brothers show up, he's going to do this manipulation thing and adopt Benjamin. And instead of getting one brother, he gets 11 brothers back. Not only does this bloody coat not mean what you think it means, it doesn't mean anything at all. So when our children go into crisis, or our spouse goes into crisis, or a friend goes into crisis, hey, what happened? Well, they did this, they didn't do this, they said that. Well, here's what you need to do. No. Tell me what happened. What does this mean to you? And what does it mean about you? Well, it means I'm weak. It means I'm worthless. It means I'm not going to have a boyfriend. It means da. Oh, wow. If that happened to me and I felt that way about it, I can see how you feel that way. Guess what just happened? Yes, I feel that way. I bet you think nobody else understands how sad you are. Yes, I'm sad. I bet you think nobody else understands how much stress you have being an eighth grader. Yes, you're right. Once you get a yes in a conversation, you're now communicating. What we teach the young officers, and I don't want to chase too much of a rabbit here, but, police officers shouldn't be sent to mental health calls. They shouldn't do it. Police officers are trained with a 3-step process. Ask, tell, make. No one who's ever been injured by a police officer was compliant. Okay? Now, I've got a loved one. They have a mental illness. It's 1:30 in the morning, and they go into crisis. Who am I going to call? If you call your therapist, that's expensive. I'm just saying. It's 1:30 in the morning. You call me out, and I've been snuggling with Miss Jones. You're going to write me a check. Just the way things work. Guess what it costs to dial 911? Not a dime. So I call 911. Guess who they can send? A kid with a fire hose? A kid with a box of Band-Aids, the paramedic? Or the kid with the badge and the gun? Guess who they send? The kid with the badge and the gun. You know why? Because force is implied. They're scaring me, and I can't make them. Guess what these kids are trained to do? Ask, tell, make. So they show up prepared to make stuff happen. Well, they show up, and there's not a crime being committed. Mental illness is not a crime. Well, then quit calling the police. The crime's not being committed. Nobody's a danger, and nobody's in danger. So the young cops need a different set of skills. This is what we teach them. Hey, man, what happened? What's going on? Hey, I'm standing in the middle of Walmart, and I'm throwing green beans across the aisle. Why? There's a giant dragon over there. You idiot. There's not a dragon there. Guess how that works? That's terrible. You can't tell him that he's crazy. There's no dragon there. And you can't go, oh, that's a big red one. Oh, there's 2 of them. You don't want to jump into that pool either. You just simply say, sir, I don't see the dragon, but I bet if you see the dragon, it scares you to death. Yes, I'm very frightened of the dragon. Wow. And so you're throwing beans at there. Yeah. Does it work? No, not yet. Well, I'll tell you what if we just leave? You can leave with me. You can leave with my partner. You can go in the ambulance. You can call your mother. How about we just leave? Because I don't see the dragon, but I bet if you do, the dragon frightens you to death. Now, at some point, you got to realize you're hitting customers with these green bean cans. And the manager's going to say, I want him out of my store. Now, when the manager says that, we're going to leave. How we leave's up to you, but we're going to leave. Do me a, hey, my boss is watching. Can't you just walk out here with me? And all of a sudden, something that would turn into a fight, a taser, a spray, or use of deadly force, they just walk out with you. Why? Because they feel heard, understood, and accepted. You didn't make the dragon go away. You didn't keep him from seeing dragons. You just simply said, hey, I bet if you see a dragon, it scares you to death. You've got a 7th grade daughter, and her and a boy are going together. They can't go anywhere. Right? Me and Johnny are going together. We all going nowhere. No, we can't drive. And they go nowhere together for 2 days, and then they quit going together, not going together, whatever. So she comes home and says, Dad, me and Johnny aren't not going any more places. Well, honey, don't you worry about it. You'll be in 8 major relationships before you're married. 60% of you will be engaged one more time. Let's just mark one off the list. Find the yearbook, we'll mark him out. That doesn't do her any good. Hey, sit in my lap and tell me, what does this mean to you? Does this mean that you're not valuable? Does this mean Johnny doesn't think you're pretty? It doesn't say anything about you. It says everything about Johnny's taste. You see what all of a sudden happened to that discussion with that little girl who's emotional? And guys, we don't understand girls' emotions. Let's just face that. We just don't. I mean, I don't have the capacity for it. But I can listen to her. So your spouse goes into trouble. Your kid gets in trouble. You're in a highly charged emotional state. And you ever told somebody that was out of control, just calm down? That's like telling me try not to be bald, right? You know, I mean, it doesn't happen. So instead of doing all this fix-it stuff, you just learn to emotion coach. I'm not emotion dismissing. I'm not emotion denying. I'm not emotion disapproving. I'm simply saying, hey, tell me what happened. What does it mean to you? Oh, wow. From your perspective, I see how that's hurtful. I see how that's terrible. I see how that's depressing. I see how that scares you. Now, as a therapist, hey, tell me what happened. What does it mean to you? Does that really mean what you think it means? I take the next step as a therapist. You don't need to do it as a parent or a spouse. You just need to understand them. And by the way, the 2 most theologically significant verses in the Bible, John chapter 1, verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And Hebrews chapter 4, we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but it was in all points tempted like we are, so we can boldly approach him in the time of mercy when we need grace and need help. God said, I'm holy, you're not. I'm eternal, you're earthly. I'm spiritual, you're physical. But you know what? I'm going to live in one of your bodies for 33 years. And then when you come to my throne and you need help and you need mercy, I understand it. I've been scared, I've been tired, I've been hungry, I've been lied about, I've been persecuted, I've been stressed, I've been depressed, I've been murdered. Hey, Father, when they experience this is what it's like for them. That's how God fixed the relationship gap between people and Him. That's how I fix the relationship gap between anybody that I run into. That's how I fix the relationship gap with my spouse. And that's how I fix the relationship gap between I'm mature and this kid's immature, but they're letting their emotions control them. Hey, tell me what happened. Hey, what does it mean to you? Oh, wow. And I use the empathy bomb. I bet you think nobody else understands how. And when you use the right word, they'll go, yes. And once you get your yes, you're right there. That's a simple crash course on crisis intervention. So we encourage and we comfort. And then the third thing we do is urge. And this is the part where we talk a little bit about discipline. This word here is different than the parakaleo words. It's matureo. And it means to charge, to motivate, and to train. It's basically the word we use for discipline. And everybody in every parenting seminar wants to know, when can we spank them? Okay, I'm sorry, that's what they're waiting on. Okay? I picked on this guy all day. You know, they want to know, okay, so, yeah, all this good. When can we beat them? Okay, well, here's the deal. Discipline is defined as putting stress in a relationship so the result is growth. It's not always punitive. It's never vindictive. Anytime you set limits or consequences on somebody and it's punitive or vindictive, it's just manipulation. And that's with a child, that's with an addict. Well, if you drink again, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and you'll quit. No. My limits and my boundaries have zero to do with your behavior. They have everything to do with my response to your behavior. I can't make a bully not be a bully. I can just make a bully not bully me. I can't keep a liar from lying. I'm just not going to let you lie to me anymore. I'm not going to believe those lies. So the definition I like to use for discipline is put stress in a relationship so the result is growth. And look, that third perception, I'm capable, I'm significant, I can influence what happens to me. I give you some power and some choices, and then you lose this victim mentality. Hey, I'm going to put you in charge of some things. My wife is a 5th grade teacher. This is a great book if you're a teacher, Positive Classroom Discipline by Fred Jones. Basically, he says what you do is, and by the way, kids, any form of back talk is noncompliance, and any form of noncompliance is back talk. Now, you don't understand that because you're kids, but have you ever played Simon Says? And how do you win Simon Says? You do what Simon Says do when Simon says to do it, right? So if I'm playing Simon Says, rub your head. Why? Do I win or lose Simon Says? I'll lose. Simon Says, sit down. I don't have to. Do I win or lose Simon Says? I lose it. Any form of noncompliance is registered by an adult, and specifically an adult male, is back talk. So if you think it's unfair, you start to do it, and after it's done, you negotiate why it was unfair. But everything else turns into a confrontation. Does that make sense? And so really what happens is you don't get to blame people for your outcomes. You get to blame yourself for your outcomes. You will never have, you'll lessen the conflicts you have with your mom and dad if you do what mom and dad tell you to do when they tell you to do it. Ta-da! But we're looking for that independence and stuff. When you talk about discipline, discipline can't be punitive and it can't be vindictive. Discipline is a thing. We'll look at Hebrews chapter 12. In Hebrews chapter 12, and the whole theme of Hebrews is either Jesus is better, don't quit, or don't quit, Jesus is better, depending on how you like to word it. And as he's talking about don't quit, the last part of Hebrews 11 are people who died because of their faith. And the first part of Hebrews 12 is you're surrounded by martyrs. Your Bible translates it as witnesses. I believe chapter 12 doesn't connect all the way to chapter 11. It only connects to the last 8 verses of chapter 11. You're surrounded by these martyrs. Your faith has brought you to a place where there were people who were killed. They were sawn in half. They were killed by the sword. They lived in caves. Don't let your circumstances affect your faith. Don't quit. And he talks about doing an evaluation. You've got things in your life that affect your ability to run this race. Identify those things that slow you down and get rid of them. And look at Jesus, who because of his faith was able to endure the cross and despise the shame. And then he makes this thing where he talks about, starting in chapter 12, probably around verse 3, he starts talking about suffering. And he says, I want you to understand that suffering functions like discipline. Now, we read this sometimes and we get the idea that God says, hey, don't do this, and if you do this, I'm going to thump you. No. God doesn't do that. The language sounds like it does, but there's a bad consequence, and it's already there. And God says, don't cross the aisle, there's a bad consequence. Well, God doesn't know what he's talking about. When I run into the consequence, that functions the same way as discipline. Everything God's ever asked you to do is good for you. Everything God's ever asked you not to do is bad for you. Period. God doesn't give us the consequences. God's trying to save us from the consequences. Don't have sex before you're married. Don't have sex with people you're not married to. Don't use these substances in excess. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, turn the other cheek, go the same. All those things, if we just do them, we stay over here and we don't meet the consequence. But if we leave that, then we run into, hey, God knows what he's talking about. And really, faith is not believing in God. Faith is believing God. God says it, I do it. How do I know if you believe me or not? You do what I say. Pretty good. So he says, when you think about suffering, and by the way, all suffering is discipline, and anything that involves discipline requires suffering. Whether you're weightlifting or doing gymnastics or marching in the band or learning to do push-ups or studying jiu-jitsu, when you do it, there's a price to pay. Any discipline, anything that's worth doing involves a little bit of suffering. And anytime you suffer, just use that as a function of discipline. Listen to what he says about discipline. My son, this is verse 5. My son, do not despise the discipline of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you're rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he disciplines and scourges every son whom he receives. If you endure discipline, God deals with you as sons. For what son is there whom a father does not discipline? But if you are without discipline, of which you will all become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not actually sons. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more be in subjection to our Father of spirits and live? For they indeed, the earthly fathers, disciplined us as it seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers in his holiness. Now, no discipline seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward, it yields a peaceable fruit of righteousness by those who have been trained by it. The Hebrew writer, through inspiration, says, look, when you encounter suffering, you look at suffering the same way you look at discipline from your dad. You had a human father. And by the way, if you've got a dad and he chooses not to discipline you, he's treating you like you're an illegitimate son. Read the old King James translation of that. That word will shock you, okay? He says, you're being treated like an illegitimate son. You're not doing your kids any favor when you're that permissive, loving parent. You don't discipline them. You prove to the children that I'm taking ownership and responsibility of you because I'm going to control some of your behavior. So if you don't discipline your children, you're disowning them. It's the other way around. Hey, you don't love me, you punished me. No, I loved you. That's why I did it. Now, you got to understand the motivation for discipline is I love you. The byproduct of discipline is we had human fathers and they corrected us and we paid them respect. When you tell your children something's going to happen, it needs to happen. That's why your discipline can't be punitive or vindictive. Because when we make those you're grounded till you're 30. Well, no, they're not. They're not that much fun to spend time with at home. So you eventually want them to go different places. So you've got to be careful. There's going to be a consequence. I have to think about what it's going to be. But if you ground them for 2 weeks and they're off in a week, they're not being grounded. You're grounded. But you can go to church camp and you go to baseball practice. They're not grounded. Kids don't do very well with this kind of stuff. But when mom and dad say this and it happens, well, if you take my car away from me, I can't go to school. Not my problem. If you take my car away from me, I can't go to work. Not my problem. If you take my car away from me, I can't go to baseball practice. Not my problem. You can pay me for gas and I'll take you. Everything you say yes to is not only something else you say no to, but everything you say yes to invites friends to the party. So you gave up the ability for me to trust you with the car. Therefore, you can't drive the car. Now, everything that involved the car goes away. You don't have the car. It's not my problem. Your problem. You should obey me. And by the way, when you do this discipline stuff, it's got to be, this is business, not personal. Whoever controls your mood controls the encounter. Okay? If my behavior makes you, I may do that just to get the show. Children love confrontation, especially ADD brain kids. Children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, they like confrontation because it gives them adrenaline. So they argue with you just to argue. And when you fall into that trap, start arguing with them, they don't care if they get punished or not. At that moment, they're getting a little dopamine hit because they watch you lose your mind. Isn't that cool? And so you've got to be dispassionate. Hey, think about taking 11. No, let's double that. Take 22 extremely large, extremely powerful, extremely aggressive men. How would you control their behavior? With a handkerchief. A yellow handkerchief. That's an NFL referee, right? This guy's 6'5", 280 pounds, runs a sub 540, and a dude with a handkerchief goes, ha! And what happens if you argue with him? Poop, another one. I got him like a magician. And all of a sudden, these huge men go, I don't want to see the hanky. And the referee doesn't care that it made him mad. Doesn't care there's a TV timeout. Doesn't care what a coach who makes $90 million says about it. I got a hanky, I'll wave it at you. And all of a sudden, just saying, these are the rules, you broke the rules, here's a hanky. You learn to do that with your kids. They're not breaking the rules because they hate you. They're not breaking the rules because they want to conquer the world. They're breaking the rules because they're teenagers and they're part adults, part kid. And they're trying to move toward independence. And if it becomes personal rather than business, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to win some silly contest. I'm sorry you did this. This is what the rule says. You're grounded. You can't go anywhere. Since you can't go anywhere, you don't have a social life. You want to go get an ice cream with me? Sure, Dad, I'll go. You'd be surprised how much good company you make. You can't watch your TV. You want to come watch black and white Columbo movies with me? Sure, Dad. And all of a sudden, you don't care about their response to your discipline. You've got to decide that when we have a rule and you break it, this is the consequence. It needs to be a logical consequence. But then it's not personal, it's just business. And then it gives them respect. Because Dad means what he says, Mom means what he says. Otherwise, you're just a paper tiger. And kids learn, hey, you don't really mean what you say. So the motivation for discipline is love. The byproduct of discipline is respect. Number 2, God does this for our holiness. We become partakers in His holiness when God keeps us away from these consequences. Well, human fathers do what seems best to them. And kids, your parents have the ability to do what they say. They can be arbitrary. You can have the color purple at my house. Stupid. I'll fight over that. But your parents have the ability to do what they think is best. And please understand, I may be doing it wrong, but if I'm doing it for the right reason, you got to give me a break. I don't know how many times people charge into my office as a youth minister, and you sent my kid home from camp, and I'm okay, you disagree with what I did. Your kid brought a wine cooler to camp. Strict stuff, can't have alcohol at camp. He was sharing the wine cooler with kids in his cabin. I didn't think he needed to be at camp. Now, did I do that because I hate your kid or because I love your kid? Okay, you disagree with what I did, but please understand why I did it. Your parents will have some rules you think are just stupid as a run-over dog. But they have those rules because they know some things you don't know and can see some things you can't see. When Balaam's donkey sits down underneath him, he beats him with a stick. When he runs his foot against the wall, he beats him with a stick. When he turns out of the way, he beats him with a stick. And when God lets the donkey talk, notice the donkey doesn't say, hey, there's an angel up there. Balaam goes, I wish, the donkey says, hey, what's going on? And Balaam says, I wish I had a sword in my hand, I'd kill you. The donkey could have said, well, there's a sword right up there, you want it? Because there's an angel there with a drawn sword. But the donkey doesn't argue with him. The donkey says, hey, since I've been your donkey, have I ever behaved this way? Wonder how many times that donkey got out of the way to avoid a snake? Wonder how many times that donkey veered out of the way to dodge a mud hole? Wonder how many times that donkey went away not to go under a low-hanging limb. And because Balaam could see all those things, he didn't think the donkey was abusing him. But on this occasion, the donkey can see something he can't see, know something he doesn't know. And it makes Balaam insane. Well, your mom and dad know some things about life you don't know. They see some things about people you can't see. And that doesn't mean you're dumb or stupid or immature. It just simply means that I've got a little more time on the planet than you do, and you need to trust my intuition. An old hunter told me one time that a baby deer who is 1 year old has spent more time in the woods than I'll spend in my lifetime. Well, I know some things about living. I know some things about dating. If you've got parents, they know stuff about sex. Just saying, you're here anyway. All right, they know stuff. I was teaching at the police academy the other day, and we're doing some defensive tactics, and I don't wrestle in bare feet. I wear wrestling shoes. And it dawned on me my wrestling shoes were older than some of the guys I was wrestling with. Well, I can teach you some things about wrestling. Well, mom and dad know things you don't know, can see things you don't see, and you may think, see, when you were this big, you couldn't play in the street because you don't understand about physics and cars. You couldn't let Mr. Hairpin be friends with Mr. Electrical Socket. You couldn't play on the oven. Why? You didn't understand anything about electricity, you didn't understand anything about heat, you didn't understand anything about cars. When you're 15 years old and dad says, don't watch that on your phone. You dad, everybody's watch that on their phone. I know some things you don't know, can see some things you don't see. You got to trust them. And mom and dad be unapologetic about things that are arbitrary. So I do this because I love you. The byproduct is respect. The byproduct is it seems best to me for your best interest. And at the end, none of this is pleasant. If it was easy, everybody would do it. None of this is pleasant, but painful. It hurts to discipline my kid. Not physically hurts. It's just hard to do. I don't want to have the drama. I don't want to have the mess up. I don't want you to go to your room and feel like you can't talk. But at the end, it yields a fruit of peace and righteousness by those who have been trained by it. So as a parent, my job is encourage you, help you learn to do things that are difficult, comfort you, help you manage crisis and disappointments and the day-to-day stuff that you're going to run into, and then urge you. Sometimes because you're immature, you're going to make choices. You have friends who make different choices. I'm going to keep you here because I love you. I want you to respect me. I'm doing what I think is best for you. And at the end of this thing, you should be able to have a fruit of peace and righteousness. If you end up without the peace and righteousness, that's not my fault, it's yours. You're not a good or a bad parent based on what your kids do. You're a good or a bad parent based on how you respond to what your kids do. Okay? My job is to pack a lunch for my kid. Sandwich, potato chips, healthy snack, some water. You go to school with that lunch. You can leave it in your locker. You can trade it for something else. Or you can use it. I've done my job as a parent when I pack the lunch and send you out. What you do with what I send you out with, that's on you, not on me. So you get to decide. But you're not a bad or a good parent based on what your kids do. You're a bad or good parent based on how you respond to what your kids do. And then ultimately, what we talk about here is that if we do this, encourage, comfort, and urge, we end up with this byproduct. I want you to walk worthy of God who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. I want you to live lives for God who calls you into his glorious kingdom. I want you to live in a way that would honor God. And as we've done with every session, we just simply ask that question. Are you living in a way that would honor God? And if you haven't lived in a way that would honor God, if you're not living in a way that would honor God, if you got some things to change about parenting, you probably don't need to come forward and talk about that publicly. You just need to decide to do it. If you got some things you need to change about being a kiddo, you need to go home and say, hey, Mom and Dad, I didn't realize it was that hard to be a parent, and I'm going to make your job easier by complying. But if you got unfinished business with your Heavenly Father, then don't leave here today without letting us pray with you, pray for you, study with you, baptize you. Let us find a way to make sure that your relationship with your Father is where it needs to be. Thank you for participating in the seminar. Thank you for your kindness and your fellowship. And if we can help you at all, come while we stand, while we sing.